It beeps when it's on Mr. Moore. He hits it a couple times. He's like, this thing's not working. It beeps again when it's on Mr. Moore. He says, no, this is not working. We know you're not a pedophile. He makes it very clear that Mr. Moore is not a pedophile, but yet the thing keeps beeping every time it gets near him. So, yeah, it's kind of like the No Sesame All Street.
I'm so excited for this.
Yes, someone is very excited about this. So this is a complaint from Roy Moore, an individual, care of the Foundation for Moral Law, against Sacha Baron Cohen, Showtime and CBS. Complaint 4, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and fraud. Plaintiffs Roy Stewart Moore, former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Alabama, and his wife Kayla Moore bring this instant action. Because what...
I just like he refers to himself as Judge Moore in the lawsuit.
He's Judge Moore in this instant action. Here. Yes, of course you're bringing this instant action. What would you be referring to other than this instant action?
How about Mr. Moore, which would be the appropriate title in this situation?
How about just plaintiff? Plaintiff brings this action against Sacha Baron Cohen, Showtime, and CBS for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and fraud. About in controversy exceeds 75,000. That's your basis for diversity jurisdiction. If you haven't seen this, guys, this is Who is America, episode 3, I think it was, episode 2, episode 3. Roy Moore sits down for an interview with Sacha Baron Cohen, but Roy Moore does not know that it's Sacha Baron Cohen. As usual, Sacha Baron Cohen is in some character. I forget which one he was doing this time. I think it was an Israeli character. And he says that he has developed a technology that can detect child... Was it pedophiles or child rapists? I forget if he was very particular with the language. I think he said pedophiles. Okay. And then he would swing the wand on himself, and he'd swing the wand on a security guard, and he'd swing the wand over Roy Moore, and it would only beep when Roy Moore was the one he was swinging the wand over. It's like a metal detector wand, a pretty standard kind of gag, right? Pretty obvious to anyone watching. He's got a button on the wand, and he just presses the button to make it beep when it's over Roy Moore. Really, really, really simple gag, but apparently it did not go over well with Roy Moore. Judge Moore is the former chief... He's really on about this, huh? Defendant Cohen is an actor. Defendant Cohen as agents, including defendants Showtime and CBS, set up scenarios where Defendant Cohen, while in character, falsely and fraudulently induce unsuspecting victims, such as Judge Moore, to be interviewed under dishonest, unethical, illegal, and false pretenses for his works. Defendant Cohen and his agents then set these unsuspecting victims up for ridicule and to severely humiliate them on film to promote his works and to generate large financial returns for himself. The project is titled Who is America? It was the 3rd episode. In order to fraudulently induce Judge Moore and Mrs. Moore to travel to D.C., where filming was to and did take place, where the majority of the acts pled herein occurred, February 14th, 2018, on Valentine's Day. He did this to him on Valentine's Day. Defendant Cohen and his agents falsely and fraudulently represented to plaintiff that Yerushalayim TV, which does not actually exist, was the producer and broadcaster of the show that Judge Moore would appear on, instead of the actual network that the show later appeared on Showtime. In addition, Defendant Cohen and his agents falsely and fraudulently represented that Judge Moore and Mrs. Moore were both being invited to Washington, D.C. for Judge Moore to receive an award for his strong support of Israel in commemoration of its 70th anniversary as a nation-state. This ceremony and presentation of this award, Defendant Cohen falsely and fraudulently represented, was to occur during the interview. Had Judge Moore and Mrs. Moore known that Defendant Cohen had fraudulently induced Judge Moore into this interview, which was a setup to harm and damage plaintiffs and the rest of their entire family, Judge Moore would not have agreed to appear. Plaintiffs relied on and had reason to rely on Defendant Cohen's and his agents' representations, including defendants Showtime and CBS, which he was led to believe were truthful, and he had no reason to doubt. I don't know. They're starting to set up detrimental reliance here. Yeah, there is such a thing. I don't know if this is it. The basics of that are that you had some cause, you had some reason to rely on someone's promises, and in doing so, you relied on those things to your detriment, to your damage. And there's more to it. It has to be a legally recognized connection between these two, not just you were humiliated because you didn't like the interview. There is certainly a bit of misrepresentation here, but was it such a misrepresentation that Mr. Moore wasn't expected to look up certain things, or remember this was the who were the guys, Chop and Steele, who were going around to TV stations and pretending to be athletic fitness nutritionist people, and instead they would do a ridiculous routine of things that were not, they were pseudo related, but instead were ridiculous shtick comedy routines instead, like exercising by doing leapfrog over one another, or breaking sticks, or ridiculous stuff like that. One of them was lifting gallons of oil or whatever, and then the oil fell off the thing and scuttled over the floor, and everyone was flopping around with the slippery oil. So, big gag and everything. Everything becomes a big comedy routine at the expense of the television studios. But whether it misrepresented something to the television studios to the point that it becomes a fraudulent misrepresentation, that's open for debate here, I think. Had plaintiffs known that the promise of a bona fide award was a ruse to trick Judge Moore into appearing on Who is America, Judge Moore would not have agreed to appear. During the segment, defendant Cohen, while falsely and fraudulently disguised as Eran Murad, a supposed Israeli anti-terrorism expert and former Mossad agent, falsely painted, portrayed, and mocked, with actual malice, defamed Judge Moore as a sex offender, which he is not. Mrs. Moore was forced to endure the effects of the interview. I'm one with the effects of the interview on Mrs. Moore, to have people continuing to call her husband either a pedophile or hebephile for his relationship with a 14-year-old girl. Thus, during the taping of the segment, defendant Cohen was in disguise as Eran Murad, falsely and fraudulently portraying himself as someone else. Had Judge Moore and Mrs. Moore known that Eran Murad was defendant Cohen, Moore would never have agreed to be interviewed, and at a minimum terminated the interview immediately, and plaintiffs would not have agreed to travel to D.C. Defendant Cohen's character falsely and fraudulently introduced a false and fraudulent device supposedly invented by the Israeli army to detect pedophiles. During the segment, defendant Cohen's device purports to detect Judge Moore as a sex offender, thus defaming him. This false and fraudulent portrayal and mocking of Judge Moore as a sex offender on national and international television, which was widely broadcast in this district on national television and worldwide, has severely harmed Judge Moore's reputation and caused him, Mrs. Moore, and his entire family severe emotional distress, as well as caused and will cause plaintiffs financial damage. After the taping, when plaintiffs discovered that they had been fraudulently induced to fly to D.C. and that the segment was to appear on Showtime and CBS, Alabama counsel sent a preemptive notice to Showtime warning them that plaintiffs would resort to legal remedies if they chose to air the segment. In the preemptive notice, defendants CBS, Showtime, and Cohen were informed that the release that Judge Moore had signed was obtained through fraud and was therefore void and inoperative. CBS and Showtime failed to take remedial action, and therefore they are jointly and severally liable.
I'd want to know more on point 24 on exactly what the release looked like and said.
Yeah, that's the critical part.
You might have a plausible cause of action if the release was dummied up to look like it was from some fake agency or whatever, but if it was titled CBS or the production company and there was nothing in the release itself that was fraudulent, then you'd have a much tougher claim. So what does the release look like is critical here. Yeah,
and don't forget, this person has done this before. This is their shtick. Sacha Baron Cohen is the guy who got a whole bunch of Southerners to say some really trashy things and then released all of that, and they sued him, and it didn't work. He gets general releases I'm not saying that I know what this particular release looks like, but in the past he has gotten general releases that protect him in general from anything. And so the person completely releases him, probably didn't read the whole thing, and probably didn't understand that they were completely releasing Sacha Baron Cohen, CBS, and all that from any claim, while they were also agreeing to be filmed and all that. I'd like to see it. I'm hoping that it will be something that's put into the exhibit, because I'd like to see their release and maybe keep that in mind for the future for myself.
Yeah, and as a general rule, this is not the first time we've been down this road. There are professional network shows which operate on sort of a prank, false premises sort of framework, which you think you're there for one reason, and then it turns out to be something else. To the degree that Jerry Springer really doesn't tell people why they're there, then that would be sort of his shtick, and there are a lot of other examples beside.
Alan Funt closed down Delaware. Alan Funt parked a construction truck at the edge of the border between, was it Pennsylvania or Maryland and Delaware, and just put up a big sign that said Delaware closed, and the whole road shut down for hours. So he's claiming defamation per se, which if you recall from our previous discussions on this channel, the per se kind of defamation is a little bit easier to prove. Basically, certain kinds of defamatory statements are automatically defamatory. If I call someone a thief, if I say someone is incompetent at their job, if I say particularly a woman sleeps around, and that damages her reputation, that is defamation per se. And if I say a person's a pedophile and they're not, that's also in the category of defamation per se. You don't have to prove it further than that. Automatically, if the statement is untrue, you don't have to go. Let's say that if I said Mr. French is a bad, let's say that I said Mr. Mueller, my friend Kurt Mueller here, is a bad driver. Well, that's not really defamatory, is it? Well, let's say maybe he is a driver, like a professional driver, and somebody goes and says, oh, well, Mr. French said, Kurt's a bad driver. I'm not going to hire him for my thing. He's out that money now. That's defamation, but that's not defamation per se. You have to sort of like make that extra link there. And so that's not a per se thing. With defamation per se, as long as the pedophile accusation is untrue, there's that's defamation, and the rest is just proving damage.
How would the fact that this was a comedy segment play into it?
There's definitely a juxtaposition of the comedy as free speech and all that, but it doesn't change the defamatory nature. Jokes or not, if the message that was conveyed was a defamatory message, Mr. Moore is a pedophile, and it's not true, then that is an actionable defamatory claim. The second part of this, though, is that no one ever said Mr. Moore is a pedophile. He said the opposite. If you watch the segment carefully, he said exactly the opposite. It beeps when it's on Mr. Moore. He hits it a couple times. He's like, this thing's not working. It beeps again when it's on Mr. Moore. He says, no, this is not working. We know you're not a pedophile. He makes it very clear that Mr. Moore is not a pedophile, but yet the thing keeps beeping every time it gets near him. So yeah, it's kind of like the No Sesame All Street. He's explicitly denying it. He is absolutely explicitly denying it all at the same time while the machine is malfunctioning. So he's going to go into court and say it was part of a comedy segment, and the machine was purportedly malfunctioning, so we didn't say that Judge Moore is a pedophile. Maybe we implied it a little bit, but then we explicitly said, no, he's not. We know he's not. Yes, we're sorry. We don't mean the machine to malfunction. It's part of the comedy segment, was to call attention to it.
Also, defamation has to be a factual statement. Would the audience really take the joke as an actual factual thing?
I don't think
Would
so.
they think that the device was actually a real device and that this was a diagnostic test?
If anybody who's ever been through airport security has seen these wands before. It's the regular black wand with the yellow yellow trim on it and the white lettering. Everybody knows these wands. They look like little Roman short swords. So that's pretty fun. Let's see if there's anything else in here. Statements are defamatory. Defendants acted in concert. Intentional infliction of emotional distress is our second cause of action. The conduct was extreme and outrageous, falsely and without substantial factual basis portrayed Judge Moore as a pedophile and sex offender. Conduct was extreme and outrageous. It broadcasted on national television and for worldwide for tens, if not hundreds of millions to see and hear, despite the fact that Judge Moore's Alabama counsel had sent them a preemptive notice. I'm sure Alabama counsel felt so powerless.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like that 14-year-old girl.
Ooh, nice one.
As a result of defendants and their agents' extreme and outrageous conduct, plaintiffs have suffered extreme emotional distress as a result of Judge Moore being falsely portrayed, mocked, and defamed as a sex offender and pedophile in this district, on national television, and worldwide. As a direct and proximate result of defendants and their agents' extreme and outrageous conduct set forth above, Judge Moore has been the subject of widespread ridicule and has suffered severe loss of reputation, which has in turn also caused him, Mrs. Moore, and his entire family severe emotional distress and financial damage, especially given his status as a prominent conservative and a God-fearing person of faith. Then they allege fraud, a third cause of action. Let's see. Knowingly made false material representations that the show segment that Judge Moore was to appear on was being produced by Yerushalayim TV, when in fact it was being produced by Showtime and CBS. This is all great as long as there isn't a release. So if it turns out that there is a general release of any kind that's applicable here, you won't see this survive a motion to dismiss. And they are asking for, drum roll please, $95 million, as well as attorney's fees.
Just out of sheer curiosity, I wonder how they came up with that particular number.
Yeah, I'd like to see that calculation. Not 100. Not $100 million, but $95 million. Oh.
You know what for me is the most legally questionable thing about this entire lawsuit was paragraph number 10, where Mr. Moore went to some length to point out that he was a former Supreme Court justice and had all these public aspects to his personality. So paragraph 10 in so many words is paragraph was it 10? Was saying I am a public figure.
9. I think it was 9 here. Judge Moore is a former Chief Justice and Supreme Court of Alabama, and a prominent conservative figure, ran for U.S. Senate as a Republican. Yeah, so
that's legally stupid. That's saying I am a public person.
So now we're saying that the higher standard of public figure defamation, which requires a showing of actual malice. So now they have to, and they didn't hear, right? I didn't see anything in here about what the actual malice was. They just went into lots of damage, fraudulently induced damage and all that. I didn't hear anything about what the foundation for the malice claim is, because with Judge Moore being a public figure, then they have to show that the defamation was not only true, but that it was done with malice, aforethought, that it was done to damage Roy Moore.
Yeah, with knowledge that it was actually false or reckless disregard to the truth, neither of which really seems possible, since the Mr. Moore had a well-established reputation well before this interview took place. So, no, you can't have actual malice for these sort of allegations since it's paranormal. So, yeah, good luck.
Does DC have an anti-slap law?
Yeah. But it may not apply in federal court if this is being tried in the federal courts, which I think it is because of diversity. So the DC quote-unquote state slap law would not apply in the federal court.
And that's our show, everyone. Thank you for joining me. I am Leonard French, your favorite copyright attorney. This is a community-supported channel. Thank you very much for your support on patreon.com/LJFrench. we have a number of excellent supporters here in the month of September. Thank you very much to Jonathan Doe, John Steele, Gavin Barnard, Eevi, Andy, Kyle Mudrak, Verement, Tayne, Sean McNamara, William Gonzalez, Michael Pearce, Grunkle Tia Marie, Terry Crisp, Richard Fournier, and Michael Jones. And thank you to the 200 plus, $5 plus supporters that are scrolling on the LED panel behind me, and I will find room for everyone on the crawl at the end of the videos that drop this week. Thank you very much for putting up with all of my camera angles and all of that. This is only the beginning. I'm going to learn how to use all of this in a kind of a constructive and helpful way, and bring you some more productive, more efficient, more visually appealing videos. So this week, I'm not sure which VODs will drop. We talked about a lot of stuff. We'll see what edits. Probably the Bach YouTuber thing, because I'd like to see if that gets, it actually was Facebook, but I'd like to see if that gets some sort of content ID strike or something. We'll see if the Johnny Bobbitt update works as a video. We might put out a short on Friday or something with the EFF article on the EU link tax and content directives, and we'll definitely produce something with the Redbox Disney Guardians of the Galaxy code and the Roy Moore story. So looking forward to all of those dropping this week, and thank you very much for joining me. Hey. Come here. Come here. Say hi. Say hi. Good boy. Good boy. Say hi to the people. Both dogs. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Hello. Can you come hop too? Good girl. Good girl. Don't hump her. Hey. No. All right. I'll see you guys later. Have a good one. Bye.